Escape to the metaverse. But act like you know, yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show, yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show, yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show, yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show, yeah.
Record without telling you. All right, there we go. Oh, dude, how was the long weekend?
Not bad, man. This is like a touching grass weekend, somewhat for me. Sort of stepped away from the computer for a little bit, which I don't do too often. So I wouldn't go as far to say a vacation. I was like hanging out with the family from out of town and everything. So getting back in the swing of things now, man. And I don't know what have you been up to? How's the long weekend for you?
Went down to Eugene, Oregon. Went to this one of my favorite ale breweries called Ale Song, and just had an awesome time there. And then went on a pretty epic hike on Sunday through Forest Park in the middle of Portland. It's just like this is massive forest that's also a park and has all these like wood paths or forest paths through them, some like more or less difficult, and because like the autumn blush and the fall foliage, some amazing views from there out onto the city and all that good stuff. So yeah, touching grass in the middle of a forest basically this weekend.
Record gathering weekend. What any big takes you came away with zooming out, man? I had a couple actually, man. I feel like I never make it a point to do that, like sort of take a step away and zoom out and everything. It always just sort of happens like happenstancely, and then every time it just sort of happens, like, and I realize it's happening, and I'm like, shit, I should like do this like a little bit more often, like build it into my schedule. It's so hard to step away, man. The space is very exciting,
really refreshing.
It is
like it gives you this clarity, like you're focused on the one thing, but like when you empty your mind like that, then like the other ideas are able to come in. And I don't know, for me, I guess like the two big takeaways, or two things I thought of, I should probably say. Like one is just I'm just so excited on the future of art, like still, right? Especially on the digital side, especially the crypto art side. It just feels like, again, like it's still the future. And that has me really excited, regardless of whatever the market sentiment is. Like just anecdotally, and this sort of touches on a current event, but the fucking disgusting situation that's arising between like Israel and Hamas, right? Like I don't want to wade too far into that because it's disgusting. What's happening? It's atrocious. But in the middle of the war zone, I was talking with an artist friend yesterday in Israel, and they're dealing with it, and they're taking necessary measures to protect themselves and their family, but they're still able to create art, and they're still releasing art like in the next couple of weeks because of crypto, because of the internet. And if you can be making art in the middle of a war and releasing it to the world, like that's crazy powerful. So that was the one thing. And then the other side of things, just thinking about community more. I've had this like article I've been trying to give birth to over the past month, and finally finished it. It should be coming out on the Fake Whale blog soon. But it touches on like crypto art, community, and infinite games. And for me, at least, in like this article, it seems like focusing on like a particular infinite game, and then the groups or collectives that orient around that specific infinite game, and how that group and collective can provide this shelter, like this home base, this feeling of like a sense of belonging in a home-like way to the participants. That to me feels like a really clarifying lens for community. And yeah, that's just what I was thinking about on this walkabouts basically this weekend.
No, it's good, man. I like the zoom out, like big picture stuff. That's sort of what I had a chance to do as well, man. Um, yeah, man. My thoughts are in a different direction, but I don't know. Maybe it all somehow ties together, man. Dude, I love your takeaways about the art, man. And I am a strong believer in that, like, overarching philosophy too. I feel like we're seeing like a lot of artists that are like demoralized essentially by the way the space has shaken out and was just, and I don't really have anything that I'm like really getting at here, but just sort of like an observation, man. It just seemed like the space like sprung up from nothing and without like a lot of money in it, to a large part the credit due to artists. And now it sort of seems like we're like all the way back at the beginning, man. There's a lot of like a lot of the same artists who were there at the very beginning, and a lot of new ones who are cool and well intentioned who came on along the way. But I feel like it's that very similar vibe of like, but different now, like a similar vibe of like, there's not any real big money flying around, so there's like a lot of really dope creative stuff going on, but then there's like the backlash of there's already been this big hype cycle, and so I feel like a lot of people had their hopes up in another upswing coming sooner than it is, and had put some of their livelihoods into trying to make a go out of being in the space. And I just feel like, every week we see like a few more dominoes fall of like people who are just sort of like getting dejected by the space or like, not as optimistic. But I don't know, man. I feel good. I mean, aside from like, I'm sure everyone would be loving to, making a bag like was possible in 2021 if you were in the right spot. I feel good about where the space is at right now because I like the creativity flying around in this market, man. It's sort of like a juxtaposition of like everyone wants numbers to go up and everyone wants to be able to, provide a better life for their family. But I really love what's going on in this space right now, man. I was talking, I had a call with Ray Buckton earlier, a dude who I'd mentioned a couple weeks ago. I met him at the founder thing. And just like good vibes, man. Feels like he's been around here. Well, he has been around forever, but not like directly involved in our community. But was sort of like talking with him about like the intersection of like NFTs, the metaverse, and interoperability and open source, and like this like really niche that we're in. And he sort of likened it to being at the bottom end of the hockey stick, man, where like all these components that we've been pushing for and we've been wanting that are all sort of like separate components, but necessarily to create the larger thing, are finally starting to come together, and we're seeing it like play out in real time at the WIP, which is what had sparked the call, man. The one with Metageist a couple weeks ago, he hadn't made it last week, but he was still talking about that previous one. That was just like the integration of so many things, ranging all the way from Metageist's like physical piece that was attached to the NFT, that was attached to the AR layer that we were experiencing in the metaverse on a code trip car that was put fully on the blockchain and then imported and, delivered a layer of interoperability and so much of this stuff we've wanted is finally coming together, man. And it's sort of crept up on me and I think everyone very quickly. It all happened very fast, but I'm like, man, we're like now really starting to scratch at a lot of the potential that we were always wishing was here. And now it's like finally starting to be here, man. And maybe we really are at the bottom of the hockey stick.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of like what you're saying at the beginning too. A lot of folks demoralized, more or less. I see a lot of like snarky critiques of folks that are more demoralized or just specifically on the art front. People are just like, oh, that collector or many collectors aren't collecting the right way. Or like, of course, if you're an artist and you quit your full-time gig to come into art, and in this market, if you didn't have like a massive following or you haven't been doing something consistent over the past few years, it's going to be a pain cage, right? But I think that's also indicative of folks focusing on the wrong game, right? So if you're you're focused primarily on the money side of things or the engagement or whatever, like the finite game side, like winners losers, there's gonna be a lot more losers than winners, obviously, especially in this market. But if you're focused on like doing the thing that's exciting to you for the sake of doing the thing and figuring out like fun ways to go about it, like you're going to have a good time. And the people that are still sticking around now are in the latter camp. And we saw that in 2018, 2019, 2020. Like those are the folks that helped kind of set up like all the crazy roller coaster that happened in 2021 into 2022. And it's just getting that it's a subtle shift in focus, right? Like focusing on just having fun as opposed to like, fuck, when am I going to get my next paycheck or something like that? Like you need to, don't get me wrong, get the finances in line, take another job if you need to, like you do what you need to do to be able to eat and all that good stuff. But here it has to be focused on that, on the fun, doing something for the sake of doing something and experimenting and like running trials of what works, what doesn't, you know, all the things that we've been doing and like we embody at the WIP and just in our individual lives. Like that's the secret sauce. And to your latter point, seeing the interoperable kind of dreams that we've had really start to manifest. And it feels like every week since the WIP where we had Metageist rolling around in his VR world and looking at his metaverse sculptures that he was then releasing on the Code Trip vehicles and monster trucks. Like, bro, the future is here today. And it's not just like the tools are fragmented or being built. Like the tools are all here. It's just we got to get them together in the right place. Like it is so fucking cool and exciting. And to see more people have that light bulb moment, of which we're a part of, because it's like, oh shit, like you just gotta kind of do the thing and then you realize what is possible, what's not possible. And with the WIP, it's just like that easy vehicle to see exactly what is possible today. And it's just crazy to measure that against the past.
It is, man. I feel like all this sort of relates to what we were talking about a little bit last week when we were talking about the whole Matt Cain saga, which pissed a lot of people off. Wonderful. Our episode, maybe me specifically. Anyway, but the removal of expectations, man. I feel like we've seen this a couple cycles now, right? Where like the money is sort of largely taken out of the equation, and you have this like flourish of creativity and I feel like it's largely attributed to the money being taken out of the equation, and it gives people room for experimentation without the pressure of having to cater to that side of the thing. And you know, I feel like it's very difficult, no matter who you are or what you're doing, to maintain like total creative integrity if it's also your lifeline. And you know, I'm not saying that in like a, you know, it's a bad thing, but like, you know, at some point, you know, there's a transition probably for a lot of people who are making good money on the art side and creation side of things, where like, you know, you have to take into consideration, if I put a lot of time into making something, who's going to buy it? And am I going to be compensated like appropriately for the amount of time that it takes me? And you know, there's all this mental gymnastics that comes into that side of the coin. And so when you remove that whole thing, man, I feel like you get a different, not necessarily a different crowd of people, but like sort of that shift that you were talking about in mentality, where like, okay, well, now that's not even on the table, so I'm just going to do things. And I feel like that's when all the exciting shit comes out. And then we see the cycle play out, right? Then like all this exciting shit comes out because people are, you know, have that creative liberty to do things, and the money flows in, and people are like, oh, fuck, now there's money here. I should like, you know, cater my style a little bit or whatever. And then, you know, rinse, repeat, it seems like. But the downswing this time around, man, I feel like we're getting into like the real good stuff now, where you don't have a lot of people out here who aren't super fans doing a lot of like shit for fun. And the shit for fun is really fucking interesting right now, man. Like maybe more than ever.
Yeah. And there's just a wider base of folks that are here compared to like a comparable time back in 2019, 2020. And there's more tools in the toolkit for folks to mess around with. So you're seeing more things like hit the wall. Of course, like a lot of shit that you throw at the wall falls off, but more stuff is sticking just because there's more people throwing shit at the wall. And that's the rub, right? And I feel like if you start to see those things stack up, which is probably what people that have been in the space, like I just keep thinking about like Peter Pan talking about like consumer crypto, that whole side of things. They're seeing what we're seeing, and you're seeing other folks like confirm what we're feeling, what we're seeing on a week to week basis. So it's, again, there's a lot of shit going on in the world. There's a lot of shit going on in the space. People are like reckoning with like what they like the hangover of the bull. I see a lot of people like in a hangover state. Like you can just imagine like people like walking up in like or waking up in a groggy, foggy haze and looking at their wall. They're like, oh, what did I spend like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on? And then it's just like adjective animal PFPs. It's like, oh, fuck my life. Versus folks that maybe went in on art and they're like, oh, actually, this is kind of dope. I still have the art. For just a specific counterexample.
No, I mean that was always like my philosophy, and I think you got to take it, right? Like if you're buying art and the value of the art goes to zero, you better like the art that you bought for the sake of art. Otherwise, what the fuck? There's like a lot of other safer, more predictable investments and things you could buy with your money, but you gotta like what you're buying. And I mean, we've all fallen victims to like FOMO, and I'm not referring to anything specifically you have. I'm not like totally aware, but for the most part, man, I feel like I learned my lesson in that direction, and try to stick with projects I believe in, stuff that I like, and that if I get stuck with it, I'm not too disappointed. But yeah, man, the hangover is real for a lot of people, and I don't know, man. I feel like we all knew. I guess it's easy for me to say, man, and a lot of people who are smarter than me fell subject to like making like poor investment decisions. The hype cycle is just so crazy, man. There was definitely a point where, and I remember it showing up to NFT NYC and walking out in Times Square and seeing NFTs like all over the place, like right after COVID, and prior to that, it was like nowhere. And I'm like, maybe this is the mainstream, and we've hit this plateau that we never go back down from, because we've hit like that certain threshold of acceptance or whatever. But nope, fucking hype cycle.
Yeah, and I think a bit of related kind of perspective to this that I observed through the years, and there's some stalwarts on crypto Twitter that have really helped kind of contextualize this and put it in the proper perspective. But like Chris Bernisky is someone that's been through multiple cycles along with others. But I guess there's like this common adage where it's like your first bull run, you probably like shit the bed and miss the train, right? And you're like, fuck, I missed generational wealth, never going to get there. Second bull run, you probably made a decent bag, but then you probably weren't, if you're like in countries that have unfavorable tax regimes, probably weren't conscious of the taxes, or you also probably fumbled more than you gained too. So that's why a lot of folks are like that. You just keep learning those lessons, keep paying attention to what you missed or disregarded in the past, and just like become more present and observational, blah, blah, blah. And then that third bull run is when things get more interesting because of those lessons learned. Of course, there's haters that like, that's like, there's not going to be a third one. Like, fuck that. People always give up before that. But I feel like there's something to that. And as long as you're kind of like self-reflective and learning from your mistakes, you're just going to be in a better position, whether like that bull run happens in crypto or not, or whatever, or just some other part of your life. Paying attention to those moments and like the ebbs and flows. I think that's also like super helpful perspective.
Yeah, dude, absolutely, man. I remember there's an early meme, like Bitcoin meme, like very early on, where there's these like two guys on a roller coaster and they're like going like super fast and they're just like totally unflappable, like, stone faces, like they're not impressed or like whatever. And I feel like exactly what you said, man. Like eventually you get to this point where like and I've been involved in crypto since like 2012 and have experienced like exactly what you're talking about, man, like in terms of like navigating these cycles and everything. And and it's just comical, man. Like, at this point, you see people get frustrated and give up and like, it's dead, it's not going anywhere, we failed our mission, like blah blah blah. And it's like, dude, for 10 years, like people have been saying that, like, nonstop. And it's only in a better, aside from like 2021 or whatever, like it's really only in a better position that it's ever been and like steadily growing in that direction. And so it's just like it's almost like people discrediting themselves like automatically now when I hear people say stuff like that. It's like, dude, it's been a decade, man. This is like, and a lot of like the stuff that like people are most excited about right now is like really nascent technology, like built on top of this technology. But like when you look at like the broad scope of things, like it's been around longer than a decade. I've just been in it that long, but I'm like, it's just so silly to me to see, people who claim to be in it for the long run and like have this like deep understanding of it to like get so dejected and demoralized. It's like, if you've been around here or you've done your homework, like this happens and, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's wild how much all of this is perspective, really, and mindset. Like staying more open-minded than not. Yeah. Like a lot of this is mental. Like
Yeah.
of course there's other elements, but it's surprising, like if you really think about it, like, and what keeps people around, it's perspective and mindset for the most part. And then again, like focusing on the right things versus the wrong things, which in the latter category, you focus on the wrong thing, you're just going to bury yourself in misery and grief and anxiety, and you're probably better off just like dipping out than sticking around if that's what you're anchoring to.
Well, dude, that's really interesting, actually, what you just said, because I feel like perspective, absolutely. But I feel like for a long time, it only really necessitated like financial perspective. And I was thinking about, I think I was tagged on some thread and Ogar was talking about like people not imploding and Matt King was talking about like he plodding along or something like that. Something where a bunch of like people been around got tagged and everything. And I was just thinking to myself, man, like, if you were in NFTs from the beginning, which you and I were, and a lot of like the WIP community and everything, like, I feel like that was really the first time in crypto in general, broad scope, where like a true community like really sprung up around the technology that wasn't like so deep in the weeds of the actual like blockchain tech or wasn't like financially driven. There was like a true like culture that came up around it, an art scene, and like, all these different people like flooding into the space, and getting that sort of vibe rugged, I think fucked a lot of people up, right? Like there's a sense that we were like building something more like beyond all that for a long time. And I think a lot of people sort of lost faith in that like overarching vision happening, man. And I can understand that in some ways, man. I'm like, dude, 4 years in NFTs are, there's been like so many crazy ups and downs and like wild things happening. Like it does take like some mental fortitude to like just stay in it and stay, faithful that this shit will, it is the inevitable course of events. And, we are on a path towards something here. It's just not maybe where, we all know it's going to get to eventually. But man, like, all those different people coming into the space during that time, I can only imagine. And you were involved in crypto, like, a long time prior to that as well, man. And so I feel like, having that perspective coming into that probably helped me a lot more than I actually realized than if I was like an artist came into the scene, this fucking all this wild shit happened, and then here we are again, back at the beginning 4 years later with just a bunch of different like tools at our disposal. It's a wild ride, man.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, being here for a long time, it gives you an opportunity to see more. But I think a lot of people mistake just longevity with that understanding and perspective and all of that. And there's just like a massive amount of personal work that needs to go into getting the right mindset, right? I bring this up quite a bit when I talk to folks, like usually when I'm drunk. But just more about like the philosophical, like religious implications of a fast-paced kind of always-on world like crypto and the internet compared to, for example, like IRL. And like think of like 1,000 years ago, or even like modern day, like Buddhist monks that are like going out into the countryside to the temple, trying to remove themselves from the world, going into the forest for years on end, trying to find that mental clarity and serenity and all that good stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, you could do that, or you could spend like a couple months like full blast in crypto and learn not to feel the swings, the crazy ups and the crazy downs, but just kind of like learning to keep that like neutral balance and perspective and just like see things, observe things as they actually are, internalize them, disregard them if not needed, and move on and move forward. But the ability to use crypto as that self-edifying tool to kind of keep that balance and that clarity in mind in such a short time compared to like what folks used to have to do in real life in an attempt to find that, I find that also like a crazy fascinating subject.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting, man. Like tremendous financial ambiguity as a path towards enlightenment. I may be close.
Dude, we've been vibing like for the past n number of years, and we've never had like any issue with one another because I think we both have that same sort of mindset where we're vibing with one another. We're hearing someone like the other side's take, internalizing it, agreeing with it, throwing it in the waste bin, and being like, that's shit, but whatever. Like, I still love you, dude. like, yeah, like I think we're proof of that, personally.
Yeah. Dude, what ideas of mine are you throwing in the waste bin, man? I'm fucking dropping solid gold like nonstop around here.
Yeah, I normally don't throw any of your shit in the waste basket, dude.
Fuck with you. No, man. I mean, not to like, well, I guess to sort of like toot our own horns, man, but I feel like that's like why people like our podcast, man. And I feel like that's why, we're sort of seen in a pretty good light for the most part in the space, because I think we do a pretty good job of not getting sucked into the crazy swings. And actually, man, I was sort of, this is going to sound unrelated, but it's not, man. So obviously this war is going on, man, and a lot of people are talking about it and on Twitter and everywhere, of course, and everything. And it's fucking crazy. And I'm trying to think of like where my place is in all of this, right? And I'm like, people don't like read my Twitter feed to like learn about my takes on war or anything like that. I mean, like maybe, partially interested in like where I stand, but like I like fucking catch and release bugs, man, like from my house. I'm like the most passive person. So like that's like basically where I stand. But I'm like, and so thinking about like the larger community, man, and how like, everyone sort of like has their role and there's like so many different like nuances and facets to it and everything. And I feel like, we've done a pretty good job of like, with the WIP of providing like that space for people to go to, man. And I read some other article about like, the religion sort of, on a big, giant downswing in general, and the lack of like a third community space for people to go to in general, and how that's contributing to like loneliness and shit like across the board in the US and like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, having been able to sort of create this like bastion with the WIP that is sort of like a third space, despite it not being a physical space. but that also people can, it's predictable in the sense that like it's gonna be fun, right? It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be like a departure from some of all that other stuff, which, and not to minimize it, and it's tremendously important, but I feel like there's a big value in being able to deliver exactly what we're delivering, and including show, man. Knowing that he's going to come in and give the hard takes on hard subjects and everything, and that has a great place within the context of the WIP and everything. And so I feel like, despite the WIP being wildly unpredictable in terms of like the content we're delivering, I feel very good about, and this is also part of like, I guess, my zoom out takes like over the weekend, man. I feel like good about like sort of what we've been able to create in terms of the position of that event within the community, and it being sort of like an anchor and a gathering point that people sort of know what to expect but don't, and I guess I'm saying that to say, man, I feel like that has sort of helped me sort of figure out my role in all of this, and what is most relevant for me to be like focusing on and everything. And I'm like, I like that niche, man. I feel like it's an important one, and it doesn't really need to deviate from that mantra and everything. And I feel like, especially like in times like this where wild shit is going on in the world, people are like upset, fighting with each other, both like over there and like within, there's people in my community from both sides of the coin and everything. And so I'm like, shit, man, being able to provide a safe space where people can just come and fucking hang out and talk about art and get away from all of that, I feel like is better than trying to enter every fray. And like we were saying during the hype cycle, man, not getting wildly distracted by like anything but exactly what we're doing within the context of what we're doing. And that was like a fucking really long ramble, man, to say that I think you and I have achieved enlightenment through financial ambiguity, and we're doing a pretty good job with it.
Amen, dude. No, but the digital destination that the WIP has become, and again, like it has been this like roaming show, but especially with Hyperfy, man, we have our literally we have our home base, our ground zero for the WIP, right? And it's very cool to be able to go back week in, week out and have that dependability with one another, but with the WIP crew, Dragonate and Show, Fractilians these days, Fox Yoga, most of the time, the beginning of the show, Samuel L. Jackson, for Christ's sake, like pretty fucking cool. And then everyone in between, the WIP fam showing up and the guests and all of that. It's so important. And it goes back to Scent and like what happened over there. Having that digital destination for folks to be able to come to and orient around, like, again, it's not so much as just a digital place to come together. Like, that's cool, but there's like a billion websites. The core ingredient, I think, is orienting around like a specific open-ended thing that people just love to do for the sake of doing it, like that infinite game. And once you have all those pieces together, and once you're conscious of trying to make people feel good when they come to that digital destination, that's when the magic happens. And that's when you achieve enlightenment.
Clearly. Dude, it feels good, man. It feels like home, right? Like we had like sort of a home back in the day with like the Token Smart Amphitheater and like the Token Smart Lounge, or at least like they felt like home-me enough because we, used them a bunch and returned to them, and had some build rights and were able to manipulate some things. But we've had this WIP parcel for a few months now, man, and it really does, like, the WIP has always sort of been like this traveling circus. And it still is, but I feel like we found a nice home within Meme Explorers to help on the tech side of things and route our events through and everything. But having like a virtual home that is it's just so the WIP, man, right? Like I've had people just like hop into the parcel and like hit me up in DMs, like not during the event, and they're like, wow, the parcel is amazing. And then I explain like, yeah, man, we've been trying to leave a piece of each of the WIPs in there from each one, and you can see like the sort of the history of events, and it's so cool to have something like that at our disposal now. And I don't know, man, I feel like I feel optimistic, dude. I feel like I was grouchy as fuck during the hype cycle and the bull market and everything. And now I'm like, dude, I feel very optimistic again about like how this all ends up. Bottom of the hockey stick vibes.
Bottom of the hockey stick vibes. It's probably the title. I can hear Dragonite just like nodding vociferously, like yeah. Bottom of the hockey stick. Although shout out Dragonate, like often he comes up with the titles of the shows too. So sometimes I see you give me credit, but like low key, Dragonate is a master of titling. So I do need to shout him out.
Shout out Dragonate, Ghostwriter title master. Good shit.
Another title. Yeah, man. But looking forward to the. I mean, we talked about it like multiple times already, but really stoked for the next couple of WIPs. We have some cool things cooking up. This week we got Code Trip and Fabiano Speziati baked into here. Next week, Metageist bringing like a group show of like metaverse sculptures together, and then maybe you want to touch on the 26th. I know you put out an open call for some crazy shit coming in for what's effectively going to be the Halloween WIP. You want to talk more about that? Let's hear whatever.
Let me shill. Absolutely. Yeah. If there's anyone listening to us, we're going to have a Halloween WIP event on the 26th, October 26th, same time. Start at the WIP parcel. And we have Misfit Pixels is going to sort of Halloweenize their zombie shooter game. So we already have like a cool activity with that, but we've done some incredible things in the past, like, visited some really decked out Halloween parcels. Eclectic Method had like a dance party for us. We, have gone trick-or-treating to a bunch of different people's parcels for NFTs. Like pretty much anything is on the table. I put out an open call on Twitter. I had a bunch of feedback that I got to sift through. But I'm sort of approaching this how I do like a lot of things where, if there's a bunch of people who want to participate, let's look at all the pieces to the puzzle and see how we can fit them all together and make something really dope. So if anyone wants us to swing by their parcel and come trick-or-treating and pick up a thing, or you got some cool installation you want to show off or send to us so we can drag it into the WIP parcel or some other idea, let's have like a really fun, weird Halloween event. We've already got like a bunch of cool stuff lined up besides the Misfit Pixels thing on the back burner. But once again, trying to figure out how it all fits together for something dope. But nevertheless, it shall be no matter what.
Oh yeah, dude. Looking forward to all those things. Yeah, man. Anything else before we dip out for the day?
No, man. I like the zoom out esoteric enlightenment conversation, man. I feel like I feel like I gotta take more perspective. I'm very guilty of like doing too many things and getting sort of stuck in the weeds at times, and need to remember to zoom out periodically. So this is a good one.
Boom. There we go, dude. All right, man. Well, I'll see you at the WIP tomorrow.
All right, good shit, dude. Later, man.
Thanks, brother. Yo, what up, Trizzler? What up, Brocock? All right, everyone. See y'all at the WIP tomorrow. Peace.